I ran around in the Porsche. The track was desert mix, oil and dirt. It was terrible. Turn 9 had reverse camber on the outside. I took a couple laps, came in, and told my crew chief, Lou Falcon, that this was the squirreliest car I have ever driven. He replied that I was just not used to a mid-engine car and to get out there and put my foot into it. So I did. I came into turn 9, and I don't remember anything else. I woke up in the hospital. I called the nurse and told her that I had got to get up because I have a race. She replied that race was long gone. It was Monday morning, so after all of my month's efforts, I didn't even get a chance to make the race. I heard that my old MG Special won its class. After a week in the hospital, I was allowed to go home. I was still very and completely total. I couldn't go back to the Cal Club because I had been shut down for 1 year, as all of us were, for getting involved with professional racing. Eventually, it went the way of many clubs. When it first got started, it did well, but eventually, things started going wrong, and that was the end of Triple R. I drove again with a Cal Club after completely rebuilding my Porsche and recovering from a severe concussion as I suffered as a result of the accident. Note from Art Evans: OG, Rich, and PR they did all the advertising. They were employed by the Triple R to get publicity and to produce the programs. The problems getting publicity for the Triple R was that the group didn't have any stars. For the most part, the sports media only pays attention to well-known names. I was able to schedule an appearance on one of the San Diego TV stations, but I had to bring a star. Luckily, I was able to persuade my friend Ken Miles to... Anyways, he also did a newspaper interview and got a modem of time and space. When race day came, it was another one of them. First, I'll read it anyway. When race day came, it was another of my job to supply a race queen. I had a girlfriend at that time who was also a model. She agreed to come for a fee. They had authorized $50, I think. The only thing I remember about the racing itself was the guy who was the main event came in for his flag, much to my dismay, to give her what seemed to me a very long French kiss. One thing I'll say for the Triple R, in a business not known for integrity, they paid their bills and we never got stiffed. It didn't succeed, I think because it competed with the amateur clubs and attract me started to.
Oh, some of the... Well, the record that I have at Willow Springs was established by my girlfriend's stopwatch. It wasn't actually a race. It was testing, which I've done, I guess, I don't know, thousands of miles here, but I've only run maybe 5 or 6, 7 races. The track is...
If you're going to be upstage, that's one to be upstage by.
Somebody's got a race car out here.
Believe it or not.
Just as a brief illustration of how much Bill has done on this track in the years that he's had it. I tested a car here in '72, and we had to stay a little bit late, and they said, well, just close it up afterwards. 5 miles an hour before we got to the chain. In my fast race car driver reactions, I was able to stop in only about 1.5 feet into the chain. It's different now. They've actually got like a little gate that you have to go through. So if you hit that, doesn't cost you a lot of money. We got out of it without anything but this little car damage. But the record, they're not belabor this too long. Back in 1977, after the Formula 5000 series, the series wasn't going very well. It was a great series, but Carl Haas sold probably all the cars he was going to sell, so he needed to change the series. So in a meeting in Chicago, they decided, well, we'll put bodies on the Formula 5000 cars, and then we'll have a new Can-Am series, and I can then he could sell all his bodies. Designed it, and we put it together. It was going to be a new concept. It was going to have skirts. This was early in the ground effects era, and the cars had, the sliding skirts in Formula One. So we made sliding skirts, but Trevor's idea was to have skirts across the front of the car as well, and then the low pressure area behind the car would go underneath the car, and we would come up with a whole new concept in ground effect. So after developing the skirts, we couldn't figure out how to make the skirts go across the front. So we finally made a suspension link that went down and pulled them up, and as the car went up and down, the skirts did too. So we had it pretty well perfected, and we brought it out to Willow Springs, and Brad drove the car around. He wasn't that experienced in that sort of a car, so he wasn't going to be that fast. But he drove the car down the straight the first time, and it looked like a speedboat, with the front end about 5 inches high, off record, without any skirts. So we went to Riverside a couple of weeks later and did a Goodyear tire test for 3 days, and we ran a minute 10 something, really fast for back then. This was 1980, and Carl Haas got wind of our lap times here and at Riverside, so he called the SCCA and made a rule that you can't have sliding skirts, or you can't have a skirt attached to the suspension. So we acted heartbroken about it, but of course we had detached it after about the first 20 minutes of running, and the car ended up being a very successful car, and ultimately was, I guess, has the Can-Am record, which isn't in jeopardy because they don't do that anymore. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I think, wasn't that the days you had kind of a shop at the Second Times Grand Prix, I think? And Andy and I have been friends ever since. Andy is presently one of the directors, the national director of the Sports Car Club of America. He has raced every year up here since 1957. Well, that was a hill climb, except for a few years when he was a guest of the government. And Andy raced here, I think he said 3 weeks ago. So we wanted him to say something about it. But at any rate, this ends our program, and Bill Pollock will say a few closing words, if he will. Now, you might remind him about John's thing, about Newman.
When we thought of having a spring affair or a spring event for the Fabulous 50s organization, I don't remember, I think it was Art that suggested, well, why don't we go out to Willow Springs? Oh, that's a good idea. Was it Ginny? Ginny Dixon. Thank you, Ginny. She should... So we were all having lunch at our board of directors meeting, which we have at McDonald's. And we thought, well, maybe we'll get, 30 people or 40 or maybe we could get 50 people, and we'd drive all the way to Willow Springs. And, well, I think we got 75 passes to begin with, and they were gone in about 2 minutes. And it wind up with, what do we have, 350? We handed out over, close to 400 passes. And John and Burl Hart came all the way from South America, isn't it, John? John lives down by the Palomar Telescope, who have a sweet tooth, and that includes 99% of you. But I want to thank you very much for coming, and we're thinking of making this maybe an annual affair. So, thank you all.
Race the Curtis. Bill Strop and I, never forget, we were down in the finish line, and Strop would get a little nervous at the start of a race anyhow, so I went over and told him, I says, I hate to do this, Bill, but I'm going to embarrass the hell out of you as soon as the race starts. He says, why? And I says, I want to blow your ass off. And so they dropped the flag, and of course me with the bigger engine and the hydromatic, went straight down to the first corner, flat out, and I jumped on the brakes. He went by me and disappeared. Because the course went around by the ocean and wound back around, and I got around about turn 4, and here he came right across the woods. And I don't think either one of us had any fenders on our cars by the time the race was over. But he was fun to race with. We worked together, of course, all the time. But T-Bird engine in it. We went to Santa Barbara, and it was running so bad that McAfee's Ferrari even passed us. But that was in practice. But the Troutman Barnes cars here, Michael Sheehan came over from Pono just to drive it around the track. But the Curtis was a fun thing at the time, in its day, and I guess they're still building them now. I don't know. But, oh, well, that was later. I was working, I left Lincoln Mercury, went to work for Ford, and in 1957, all of the manufacturers were forced to stop stock car racing. And so I'd been working for Ford and then on to Chevrolet, and so and of course Troutman and Barnes and various other people. But the car, of course, as you all know, ended up really well. When we were running the Scarabs, every racetrack we ever went to, we set course track record, set new records, and if my car finished, it won. And why we stopped racing it when we did, I couldn't really tell you, because we knew that we were so smart then that we should possibly build a Formula One car. That was the hot setup, and it wasn't really very successful. But I will tell you that just recently we rebuilt a Scarab Formula One car, and I had an original engine. Something happened, I don't know, my hat blew off and I chased that, and but we never did get that project going, and I had that car for quite a long time, and then the car disappeared, and I had the engine for a long time, and I eventually sold it. I was always going to do something with it and never did, and but recently some people rebuilt that original car, and how they managed to find all these pieces is beyond me, because the first time I saw the car was at Goodwood, and Phil Remington was there, and we were standing there looking, and Phil would say, "That's my weld right there," but they had all of the original pieces, and I took the engine, had taken the engine back to the shop, and we found an archive.
So I really enjoyed racing here. One other thing I wanted to tell you about it. Years ago there was a company called Piston Rings, and this mentioned Ferrari, it reminded me of this car. And the people that owned Grant, a couple of brothers, had this car. They bought it from Ferrari to race in Indianapolis. It was built for Indy, but they couldn't get any parts for the car, like crankshaft parts, things, rods, pistons, so they just never took it to Indy. But they never ran the car. And I was working for Pete Peterson at the time, and so they asked me if I would bring the car out here, because they'd like to hear it run. They'd like to see it go and take some pictures of it. I said, yes. Are you kidding? So we came out here with 10 gallons of methanol, and the car started immediately, and that was one of the miracles, this thing fired up. I had never driven a full-out Formula One, and there was just no way I was going to make this first turn down here. It was just going to wrap this thing up into a ball. And I get off the throttle, and I jump on the brakes, and I'm about 100 yards short for the corner. And this car, I've never driven anything that had this kind of acceleration and the kind of brakes. But it was exciting, and that was it. That's the only time that car ever ran. was like 3 or 4 laps around here, and that was it. But this Willow Springs is a joke, but it's been a special for a lot of people to come out here. One other thing I'd like to just mention too, they have a learning center over on the other side of the course, and I took my grandson out here last year, wasn't it? And put him through this driver training thing. The best thing you can do for a kid. Everybody should go through that driver training thing. You learn what happens when you lose it. You learn what happens when the ABS system hits and the car shakes and everything, and all that kind of stuff.
If any of you were here, you know what I mean. They oiled, as Bill explained, they oiled down the track, and you walk on it in a hot day. Yeah, you got taller and taller, and it was hard to manipulate the pedals in your car with all of this goo on it. You put on the brake, and you can't take off the brake. Anyway, after that, the Cow Club did not race here, but we had some hill climbs in the 50s. But an organization called the RRR, meaning Road Racing Register, was a kind of an offshoot group that decided that they didn't want to race for free, or at least to enrich Joe Wiseman, and they wanted to have professional sports car racing, road racing. So they formed this organization. The secretary was Joe Playan, who's here.
Going to be said about the track with the oil and the dirt, and turn 9 with its reverse camber and 20-foot drop-off. It was one of the most interesting races for the first race. Anyways, I had an MG Special, which was a Hageman MG Special. It was a Roman space frame, and it was light and very fast. And I was making this turn right up here, going up the hill, and Ralph Phillip, who was behind me, hit me, put me up the hill. I was going to bring the pictures. Less than a half minute, taking 3 pictures of the series of events there. And the car went up the hill after he hit me. It went up a little bit more. The car started to go over. And I put my hand down, and I held the car up. I had 3 pictures. I didn't bring them with me. The most interesting thing will be when I talk about the Triple R race. Jock?
Sometimes a friend will do something so generous and so mind-blowing that you just don't know how to respond. John Streets brought my old car down from Palo Alto just so that I could take a few laps with Yuriko. And then he turned around and went home. He didn't even stay for lunch. He came all the way down just to do that. God, it's just unbelievable. John, I love you, man. I love you. A little closer? Okay. All right, there we go.
If any of you were here, you know what I mean. They oiled, as Bill explained, they oiled down the track, and you walk on it in a hot day. Yeah, you got taller and taller, and it was hard to manipulate the pedals in your car with all of this goo on it. You put on the brake, and you can't take off the brake. Anyway, after that, the Cow Club did not race here, but we had some hill climbs in the 50s. But an organization called the RRR, meaning Road Racing Register, was a kind of an offshoot group that decided that they didn't want to race for free, or at least to enrich Joe Wiseman, and they wanted to have professional sports car racing, road racing. So they formed this organization. The secretary was Joe Playan, who's here.
Going to be said about the track with the oil and the dirt, and turn 9 with its reverse camber and 20-foot drop-off. It was one of the most interesting races for the first race. Anyways, I had an MG Special, which was a Hageman MG Special. It was a aluminum space frame, and it was light and very fast. And I was making this turn right up here, going up the hill, and Ralph Phillip, who was behind me, hit me, put me up the hill. I was going to bring the pictures. Lester and I happened to take 3 pictures of the series of events there. And the car went up the hill after he hit me. It went up a little bit more. The car started to go over. And I put my hand down, and I held the car up. I had 3 pictures. I didn't bring them with me. The most interesting thing will be when I talk about the Triple R race. Jock?
Sometimes a friend will do something so generous and so mind-blowing that you just don't know how to respond. John Streets brought my old car down from Palo Alto just so that I could take a few laps with Yuriko. And then he turned around and went home. He didn't even stay for lunch. He came all the way down just to do that. God, it's just unbelievable. John, I love you, man. I love you. A little closer? Okay. All right, there we go. They able to go out and compete with what the world had to offer. There we go. And think about it. So we built a car in our garage that could go out and compete with the best there was. Now, they're ultralight and very powerful. And all they really were, if you think about it, were hot rods slash dragsters, okay, with some fenders and some headlights. And no thought, let me assure you, no thought was given to streamlining or aesthetics. You've seen my car, no aesthetics. Now, I can't tell you about the other cars or what they could do, but I can tell you about mine. Tom Sparks, sadly I was hoping he'd be here today. Tom Sparks built my car. He was a champion drag racer. He had a Willys coupe that had a supercharged flathead Ford in it that dominated drag racing in 11 seconds, okay? Now, to be fair, it's over 2,000 pounds heavier than my car, but still, you know, those are pretty damn good times. Now, before I talk about Willow Springs, I want to talk about where Specials and Curtis's didn't cut it. The next race we had, the Triple R, was in Stockton. It was an airport race. And a guy showed up with a D Jaguar. We're on the starting line, flag drops, and I just leave him tied to the proverbial stone. And I'm about a third of the way down the straight, half down the straight, and I'm redlining at 120, 125, and he pulls up alongside, puts it in fourth gear. Bye-bye, bye-bye. The Jaguar people tell me that that car would go at least 150, 160, and that was the end of the race. But it wouldn't do him a damn bit of good in this course. And that's why we special guys and on $750. Wow. What makes me sad is that all we really wanted to do, and I'm going to let Joe talk to this, but I know from our standpoint, racing professionally was not to win the big bucks. Come on, $750. But what we wanted to do was run it like a business. Depreciate, expense, do the kinds of things that businessmen do. It would have made such a difference. And it's very sad because we couldn't get it done. But there you go. So I'm going to let Joe talk about the Triple R.
Was a 15-era Southern California-based attempt to establish professional road racing. The idea was to pay prize and perhaps appearance money in the same way as the circular trackers. By the end of the decade, the Triple R had disappeared, and of course the SCCA itself eventually embraced professionalism. I have not been able to assemble a complete record of all the Triple R races. Only a few programs have been located. Castle, owned by Rudy Clay and Dick O'Neill, and operated by Rudy.